South Africa is already welcoming the arrival of international delegates. Security measures and logistical operations are being finalized as the country gears up to host world leaders this weekend. For more on the build-up and the latest developments on the ground, we cross to my colleague Thulasizwe Simelane, who's in Nasrec, Johannesburg, for us. Good afternoon, Thulasizwe. It's most certainly going to start getting busy where you are in a couple of hours, but we have indeed been monitoring the arrivals of most of those dignitaries. Just share with us the very latest on your front.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Mfundo. And we've been watching those moments, those profound moments of the march against gender-based violence, the picket, and the moment that the Women for Change have been calling for, as well as activists across the country. And just the profundity of that moment must not be lost on all of us. And therefore, we took it all in as we were watching those scenes from across the country. And they do come at an important moment for South Africa. This is the moment where South Africa rolls out the proverbial red carpet. It's a big moment on the global stage for South Africa. The skies above the country are some of the busiest skies you can imagine, with lots of landings at OR Tambo International Airport, Waterkloof Air Force Base in the last 24 to 48 hours, delegates arriving, and also that traditional signature South African hospitality. You see it even as you drive on the highways making your way to the Nasrec Expo Center. You will see the images that have been plastered along the highways of the various leaders, 19 sovereign states plus 2 country groupings that make up this forum known as the G20. As they make their way here, they will be greeted by their faces plastered along the way, as well as a greeting in one of the South African languages. I saw Sawubona, Narendra Modi, Sawubona, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, etc., etc. But that's just on the aesthetics and the hospitality front. But as you rightly said, we will be joined by Sophie Mkwena in a while, a specialist correspondent at the SABC, who has some developing news around the work being done by the Sherpa, the various Sherpas, the South African G20 Sherpa, working with representatives of the leaders of the G20 over a period of the last year to try and narrow down points of consensus over 15 different working groups that cover a whole host of issues. The whole issue of women empowerment and gender equality falls within one of those working groups, and therefore it is quite relevant that we are having that conversation as well at the same time. Sophie Mkwena will report on the latest regarding work being done to ensure that by the time the summit is done on Sunday, there is a Johannesburg declaration by leaders. You'll know, ordinarily you wouldn't think that would be a contentious issue, but it is, because in the last few days you heard the expressions of the United States saying that they warn against this summit arriving at a leaders' declaration in the absence of the United States, who are not attending but are rather sending a low-level delegation for the handover part of the summit. So a lot that's happening there, and Sophie Mkwena will update us on it all. But let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the importance of the G20 presidency, the various pieces of work that the G20 has been able to do from the days when it was purely economic in nature and focus to where it is now at the Leaders Summit level. I'm joined by John Curtin, who is the director of the G20 Research Group at the Monk School of Global Affairs, and that is out in Toronto in Canada. So thank you, and it's great to be with you this afternoon. I think it's important that we start with the theme that has been raised almost organically. The activists across South Africa taking a moment to say, while the eyes of the world are on South Africa, let's focus on this issue that bedevils South Africa, that afflicts South African society, gender-based violence. You and your colleagues have tracked every G20 since the start, including the summits before the Leaders Summit. This theme of gender-based violence and the root causes in various societies, as well as interventions that can be introduced, how prominently does it feature in the work of the G20?
Well, it really burst onto the G20 Summit agenda and its declaration and its commitments. In 2014, when the Australians hosted it, and it's been there ever since. The initial focus was women in the workplace, and they said by this year there must be a greater move, this much, towards having women in the workplace. So equal pay for a work of equal value, taking into account all the particular constraints that women face. They do more childcare than the parents do. But here, as we heard from President Ramaphosa in his closing address to the Social Summit just yesterday, it's going to be bigger, bolder, better than ever before, focusing on gender equality in many dimensions, but above all, violence against women. And he did say, specific promise, he spoke about gender more than anything else during his remarks. He said he's going to have the South African government declare it to be a crisis, and I'd like to see in the declaration, he'll get all the other G7 leaders to say it's a global crisis, and we're going to act to stop it, as we have other crises in the past.
Yeah, so it will be interesting to see the extent to which the various themes of the working groups in the Sherpa track are reflected in the final declaration. But let's backtrack. Part of the reason we are talking to you is your vast experience in the work of the G20, and as I say, you will tell me a bit more about it. Tell me about the evolution of the G20. It's not a natural treaty-based, convention-based international organization. It's a forum. You've tracked it all. How have you seen the evolution of the G20 to where we are today?
It's come a long way. We Canadians have a particular interest because it was a Canadian finance minister who first conceived of it when he saw all of the financial crises in Latin America, and Argentina is with us still. But the Big Bang was the Asian-turned-global financial crisis that began in the global south, but quickly infected the global north. So the message was, we're all in this together. We need to bring together the finance minister, central bankers of systemically significant states.
Yes.
And he worked with Trevor Manuel, the South African highly impressive finance minister. Everybody in the IMF thinks that. They saw him, they worked with him at first hand. So they got an agreement that the finance ministers and central bank governors would meet every year, and they started in 1999. But 3 years later, 9/11, when terrorists hit the Twin Towers and the Pentagon.
Yes.
So they pivoted to focus on terrorism. So it wasn't just governing the global economy.
Yes.
It was governing global security.
Seeing new issues being added, issues such as security.
That's right. And it took, as I said, until 2014, until gender appeared big time. But at the very first summit, that was in Washington, D.C., November 2008, George Bush, Republican President of the United States, climate change was in the declaration.
So that's the evolution from a purely economic grouping and forum, where what now forms just one of the many tracks, that's now the finance track, the finance ministers and governors of central banks. It's now one of many. So that transition, the introduction of the Leaders Summit, what brought that on, and how have you read the infusion of that level of importance to elevate it from finance ministers and heads of the central banks to now including the leaders of the various countries? What has that done?
It's hard to think of a problem in our countries that can be solved by even the leaders just sitting home alone. We're also interconnected, right? Climate change completely. Emissions that go up anywhere in the atmosphere cause harm everywhere in the atmosphere. Energy crises, shutoffs, same thing. And we do know that even something as top of the mind in many countries is housing.
Yeah.
Good homes. You know, you have to import some of the materials to build good homes. You need to import actually the workers to construct them in Canada, even in the United States. In that sense, immigration is good for economic growth as well as good homes, which makes the workers better when they go on the job. So it's those interconnections that you really need leaders to look at, because our leaders alone in our governments are responsible for dealing with all the subjects of all their portfolio of ministers and putting them together in win-win solutions, co-benefits, and that's the ultimate test of what they do when they get together at the summit.
Sure, but that's them agreeing at a summit level. But what's the follow-through? How do we ensure that what is agreed upon, I mean, you look at the agenda for South Africa, the 15 working groups, they cover such areas as agriculture, anti-corruption, culture, development, digital economy, disaster risk reduction, etc., etc. If we're saying that this is not a treaty-based, convention-based organization, international organization, it works largely on consensus, what's the follow-through then?
Well, it's an excellent question because the leaders are always fond of making promises, commitments in the declaration at the sunny mountaintop, but the next day they go back home to the dark valleys of domestic politics. And do they even remember their promises? Do they keep their words? My G20 research group are the self-proclaimed G20 auditor generals. So from the start, we've measured it, and we know. So overall, since the summit started, the 19 of them so far, the answer is 71% of the priority commitments they make are implemented within the next year or before the next summit
really? That high?
Comes along.
Wow.
Well, it's B-, so you know, which I think every parent would like their kid's report card to be a bit higher, but it's awfully good, and it's a lot better than the resolutions passed through the Security Council of the UN, for example.
But how do they do this follow through? Because I imagine that it's not a resolution that says we've agreed, here are the resources we're going to implement. So for instance, if you're talking about global trade, how do you effect change in that regard in the various pockets in which these countries are?
Well, at many of the first few summits for several years, one of the biggest thing they did in the wake of the global financial crisis, the instinct of some politicians was throw up the trade barriers and keep the jobs at home. But they said no. They took an anti-protectionist pledge. We won't do it. And then a few years later, they recognized, well, we've been failing a bit. And they said, we will give you redress. We will correct the sins we have already made. So the G20 has been a standout success, much better than the WTO in doing real trade liberalization in its early years. And we'll be looking here to see what kind of support it will give to the WTO, and above all, full support for the African Free Trade Agreement. And since the Americans have canceled their bilateral free trade agreement with Africa, we'll look for all the other G20 members to come through and produce their own.
Is it also about influence that some of these countries can wield at other fora, right? So those that have voting powers within other international organizations, your IMFs and the likes, do you take conversations happening at the G20, the consensus reached here about what's important, what should be prioritized? Have we seen that translate into championing certain positions in the other institutions of global governance?
Oh, very much so. Canada, for example, hosted the G7 Summit of major market democracies this year. They were working hand in glove from the start with President Ramaphosa as host of the G20 to have both of their summits and all the ministerial meetings do the same thing. And we see the results, critical minerals, energy security, and you call it disaster relief. The Canadians picked a particular one, wildfires, right?
Yes.
And of course, we then take it, particularly the economic ones, debt relief, back to the World Bank and to the IMF. They've got the money, but then also to, well, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, where South Africa and Canada have long been influential pioneers. And you've got the BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So we count on you to take the messages from and to there as well.
All right, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Pity we're out of time. I still have a whole lot more, but I do hope that in the coming days, you and I will get to speak again, because I really was enjoying the insights. That's John Curtin, who is the director of the G20 Research Group. That is at the Monk School of Global Affairs, and that is out in Canada. You're watching SABC News, coming to you live from the Nasrec Expo Center. We are the host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa. Stay with us for a whole lot more of that coverage throughout the next few days.
All right, thank you very much to my colleague there, Thulasizwe Simelane, who's out at our studio in Nasrec. An insightful conversation indeed as we continue to build up to the G20 Leaders Summit taking place from tomorrow until Sunday. Well,